Good morning, everyone. My name is Paul Beyer, and this is our GenAI Daily Executive Briefing, where our analysts, rate articles essential, important, and optional for the time-starved AI leader and their teams. Today's briefing is sponsored by GAI Insights and will be led by Tim.
Morning, everybody, and hope you had a great holiday or still having a holiday, whatever may be the case. Ankaj, we have a small crew today, but let's get going. Let's start with our first article.
Sure, thanks, Tim. So the first news update that we have for today is from law firm Allen and Overy. So they have launched a new AI contract negotiation tool based on GenAI, and they are doing this with Microsoft and the AI legal startup Harvey.
Right. So I'll start here because, in fact, my last Substack/LinkedIn newsletter talked about this product. It's called Contract Matrix, and it does exactly pretty much what it says, generates templates for contracts for lawyers, so eliminates a lot of the research and paralegal work that gets done going into a contract negotiation. Interesting thing in the background is that the companies that they've used it with and the law firm itself found that the biggest advantage was the focus of the higher level executives on business issues, getting all the contract minutiae out of the way before they even start. So I would rate this as optional unless you're in the legal firm, in which case it's essential. But interesting reading and another interesting case study. This is going into production with Microsoft Azure AI.
Boy, I put it down as essential. I think that, we go back to the WINS framework. Here's an example of, leading multi-billion-dollar law firm, starting in Europe, coming to the U.S., transforming, pretty important core activity all within 12 months of the launch of, roughly 12 months, right, from the launch of this tool. I'd say essential. I mean, this is just the first crew that's going to see it, right? Not the first, but among the first.
Yep, and they do talk about the potential job impacts as well, though none have been spoken of directly yet because it's just been released. Adam, you have comments?
Yeah, I was going to take the middle path and say it's important. It is a really good example, but I wouldn't say it's essential, broadly speaking, for our audience.
Paul, you want to be the tiebreaker?
Yeah, I'll split the middle as well as important. I mean, I think I agree with John and you that this has come from nowhere 6 months ago to industry defining in a WINS framework, and every executive needs to ask: is there a Harvey moment coming up or already existing in my industry?
Yeah, I mean, to make the case for essential, everybody pays lawyers' bills, so you should at least be using this to go back to your lawyers.
Okay. So we have important versus essential here, and I said it was essential for law firms, but it is a big deal. I can go.
I can live with important.
You live with important. Let's go with important.
All righty, sounds good.
Ankaj?
Okay, the next one is from Google. So there are reports from the information outlet that Google might lay off 30,000 employees due to AI.
Right. John, Adam, have you had a chance to look this one over?
Sure. Yeah. Again, I was voting essential because we're seeing real impact. They're talking about, but at least important for me for all the reasons we just said.
Adam?
Yeah, I'd say important. I was considering essential because we're going to see a lot of this kind of news, and it's real stuff. But the fact is, it's not that unexpected. I don't want to seem alarmist, and it might lay off. So it's important that people are aware of this and what's going on, but I don't think it's essential news that we need to be raising a flag about.
Right. Paul, you have any comments?
Yeah, it's in the sales and marketing. It's might. They may be going through. Yeah, nothing more than important.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the thing is that, look, every organization needs to look at all their indirect costs: marketing, legal, software if it's not an essential thing, I mean, going into 24, you ought to expect all those indirect numbers better come down.
Yes, this is about sales, and Google's already done a big layoff, and as Paul noted, and Adam as well, this is a might layoff. This is a sort of a scaremonger clickbait to a certain extent.
No, I can live with. I can even live with optional on this. I'm just making the bigger point that as we go into 24, every business is going to have to rip apart their cost structure using this stuff.
Yep, I agree. So I think this is another indicator of that. And, I'll call out Kevin Kelly, the founder of Wired, who I have a lot of respect for, who made the comment a few months back, I don't know, I haven't heard of a single person who's lost their job due to generative AI. I'm like, well, Kevin, it depends how you define it, because people are going to lose jobs or in their current capacity. So yes, if we have, in Adam Smith's parlance, a wealth creation technology, ultimately there will be more value and there will be more jobs in theory. But in practice, the path there is rocky, and people will definitely lose jobs as part of it.
I'm stunned. He actually says that. I mean, I know at least 3 people who professional blog posters have lost their job, and they were charging $100 a blog post. So it's maybe on the margin. Yeah.
Right. Well, you can look at it as those are hourly wage earners who have lost hours, lots of hours, and so effectively that you're right, they've lost their jobs. But at the point he made this comment, which was probably 6 months ago, I think, there weren't a lot of certified layoffs directly due to Gen AI. I mean, it's clearly coming, in my opinion. In fact, the Harvey article, the law article with Allen Overy that we just did, also speculated again. It was speculation that there would be some cost reduction involved in and I can see paralegals, especially, and research assistants as being at least reduced in hours based on that. Okay, so we're calling this optional or important? Do we have votes here?
I can go to either.
I thought we heard optional. Yeah.
I think optional myself. There's going to be a lot of articles like this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Tim, I think as you're the moderator, you can be the tiebreaker.
Okay. I vote optional for this. There's going to, especially given it's a clickbait kind of article.
The next one.
Oh, there you are. Okay.
Yeah. So the next one is from Apple. So Apple seems to be exploring deals with news publishers to train its generative AI.
Adam, did you see this one?
Yeah, I've looked at these. I mean, it's interesting. I think it's optional. We've seen a lot of news actually in the last week about what Apple's finally starting to do a little bit at a very foundational level, but there's nothing that anyone could really take any action on or that has any material impact at this point. It's certainly interesting, and it'll be smart of them to see what they can get from that, but I consider it optional.
Yep, I agree. John or Paul, any other votes?
Optional.
Yeah, I think the only other comment is I think this is yet another step towards securing unique data. So if Twitter and X is really going to monopolize or leverage its Twitter feeds, and large language models are becoming within 4 to 6 months with a team of 20, you can match 3.5. This is another example potentially of data scarcity being the critical part of one strategy.
And data quality as well. So there's 2 things. I think this is optional. 2 quick comments. One is this is yet another deal with news organizations. I think we're going to see more and more of these because of the liability issues and the intellectual property issues. The language model developers are going to try and cozy up to news organizations for breadth of content. It's more, I think, in the case of these kind of things, so they have all the news that they want going forward as much as for training the models, in my opinion. And then, of course, there is the training of the models to avoid embedding inappropriate IT into the training data. We're going to see over and over again how important the training data is. So we'll come to that in another article here in a moment.
Well, and I think, Tim, the courts still are, I mean, they're very early in the litigation stuff, but once it starts moving through the systems of Getty's against OpenAI, we've really got to understand where the legal risk
Correct.
is for this.
Correct. So they're trying to stave off any legal risk by having licensing and other and appropriate deals in place so that there can't be any liability from their perspective. We'll see how the courts decide eventually, but I think that's what they're trying to do is very reminiscent of Apple's early deal with the music companies to create iTunes, where there was before that a lot of issue, if you recall, with Napster and others over how music was served and used. Similar kind of problem. Okay, but I think optional, there's nothing here really for action. Interesting if you have time to read it. Next.
Okay, the next one is from HD Hyundai and Google Cloud. So Hyundai has partnered with Google Cloud for generative AI advancements across its shipbuilding and construction machinery business in Korea.
Does anyone not think this is optional?
Yeah, me.
Okay, excellent. Excellent, Adam. Why?
I'll tell you why it's important, and it's because it's actually a bit of a sleeper, I think. HD Hyundai has the Hyundai robotics division, which now over almost 2.5 years ago acquired the majority interest in Boston Dynamics, which is probably the leading robotics company in the world. And when you look at what Tesla is doing with Optimus and the adoption of AI into these robots that we're going to see in 24 pretty significantly, faster than people think. It's important for people to understand the landscape, and it looks like it's kind of like a Hyundai with Google kind of thing, against Tesla. So at an industry level, there's actually something pretty important going on under the hood. And I looked, they don't mention Boston Dynamics or the robotics division in this article, but it's written all over it for me.
John, you have a perspective here?
It's interesting. I was going to make it optional, but I hear Adam's thing. I think he's right that we're 24. I don't think any of the predictions I've read so far for 24 are giving enough emphasis to this, autonomous robot stuff in the physical world. It's going to come hard and heavy and different shapes and sizes, modular. Interesting. So yeah, I can go for important.
Yeah, I'll argue back on the optional side, not Adam, that your trend's not important, but this particular article is just that they had a meeting, that the Google Cloud VP is going to speak at the HD Hyundai event at CES that's this week or next week.
Maybe we need a trend flag for like robotics,
yeah.
automation or something.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, let's call it optional. And yeah, we do need to either write something about these kind of trends or find a way to note them, because I think there is some salience to that point that robotics is going to be a much bigger deal. I think this is, again, another case. It's rare. It's rare in the technology industry that things are underrated. But I think robotics in particular and the advancement of generative AI into robotics is underrated right now. People are surprised at how fast things are happening with generative AI in general. And I think they're going to be even more surprised with robotics. But as you pointed out, this article doesn't mention anything about it directly. It's really a puff piece. So we'll call it optional, but keep your eyes on the robotics industry. Next.
Okay. So next one is not really a news update, but a discussion of sorts that the cost of inference is going down, and all the model providers, they are losing money while offering these tokens for very sort of low price.
Yeah, this is a pretty deep article and really interesting, but I'm going to say optional for our audience at the reader level, because it's a long article with a lot of technical depth. So unless you have that depth at one level, it's going to be a tough slog to read this article. But I could be arm twisted into optional if you just read the tables, because this is something we have talked about a little bit before, which is there is going to be a lot of productivity and a lot of value created through these generative AI tools. The question of who gets that value is an open one. And I've certainly pounded the table a lot that it's not clear that these unicorn AI companies are going to make a cent from it, or that's probably too extreme, but are going to return anything significant. So both investors and corporations need to be cautious about who they, what vendor they pick and get close to, because I think there's going to be a lot of carnage for exactly this reason. That the old joke, well, we charge zero, but we'll make it up on volume, and that's where these companies are headed right now. And the price is now zero. I think it was Open Router that is charging nothing for tokens. So it's free. It's a free inference model, and free is a hard price to compete with.
Yeah, and Tim, I'll argue that I think that the definition of this whole market is wrong. I mean, to me, this is a motor or an engine, and the market really is for automobiles. So there's a B2C automobile large language model where I need to sign up, and the text box, and OpenAI's got that, and the whole B2B one is, I need all the security and the hosting and everything around it. So this breathlessness of, my engine's a little better than your engine, I think is an interesting sidebar for the tech audience. I think it's almost a nothing burger, other than it's approving fast for the actual corporate audience.
Yep, I just think you have to be cautious. Again, we've said this many times. Microsoft will make a lot of money, and they already are. It's not clear any of these vendors, even the ones that have $1 billion+ valuations, will make any money. And that makes their entire viability at risk.
If they're only selling API, you mean? API to super.
Yeah, the large language model is the primary business in which they're in, especially. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's, again, there's the oldest joke, and one of the oldest jokes in investing is from Warren Buffett. It's, how do you make $1 million? Start with $1 billion and buy an airline, because he bought US Air back in the 70s. And they had the similar kind of thing where there's no differentiation. New startups come in and just drive the price basically to the bottom. And so the consumers get tremendous benefit, lower prices. So there's benefit, but the benefit is diffused throughout society, and very little benefit is captured by the vendors.
So it sounds like optional.
Optional. It's definitely optional. Prudence is the watchword with vendors. Next.
Okay. Moving to next one. So this is around a new 7 billion parameter agentic model that claims to be outperforming GPT 3.5 and Orca on reasoning benchmarks.
Adam, did you take a look at this?
Yeah, I'd probably say optional. It's another small model. We're continuing to see the trend we'd expect.
Yeah, I think it's, again, one of these very interesting ones, in that it's another point on the roadmap of how quickly these models are evolving to smaller, more efficient models. This one also makes the point that we were discussing earlier, that data quality has an enormous impact. The quality of the training data and curation of the training data has an enormous impact on the quality of the output model's reasoning. And so, to the point that everybody's excited about Grok and Twitter, not entirely clear to me that's a good plan, because unless they do a lot of curation on that data. Other thoughts?
A lot of optional today. It must have been a U.S. Christmas holiday.
Well, I think we're getting harder, becoming harder graders as a bunch, I think, because we recognize the time-starved nature of our audience.
Well, I also think the goalposts have moved. In June, oh my gosh, here's an open source model that's as good as 3PT. Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
Right.
Now it's
right.
Get in line with 25 others.
You quickly normalize to the new normal, which is not an awkward phrase, but normal gets redefined almost daily.
I think I think what's interesting is when you start thinking about, how you manage these things if they become a big part of your cost base, a lot of these things that we're saying are optional will become relevant, right? What's the model look like? What's the supply look like? All of those stuff. There's going to be a whole, kind of science of what this looks like. I mean, supply chain was birthed on the back of, the componentization of large organizations like car companies. I think we're going to see that here. But yeah, for now, I think there's just a lot of upstarts.
But Tim and Adam, I mean, I would think that as a company, yes, it's great your open source widget does X. I'm also really interested in the robustness of your community, right? So I'm gonna go with open source. I got a nice Linux community that I have high confidence I can continue to update that thing in the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah. So I think, again, that's why we say Microsoft, Apple, even at the end of the day, they will embed these things directly in their products that consumers see. And so they won't even know there's generative AI involved necessarily. And that works because you don't have to worry about whose model it is and how you're developing. But there will be a lot of development. And again, right now, especially, there will be moves. For instance, one of the most interesting things in this article is they showed that this particular model runs, and some models run better on lower cost GPUs, not on the high end GPUs. And so that's a threat to NVIDIA at the end of the day. If all of a sudden the demand, and I'm going to say this 100 times before we're done, I've never seen a shortage not followed by a glut. And if all of a sudden everybody can use A100s, which is the second tier chip, instead of H100s, NVIDIA's top tier chip, what happens? All of a sudden the market for chips could really nosedive, especially the high-end, super expensive chips. So we'll see.
Yeah, I think there's not enough attention being paid to the fact that the whole tech stack could start to demature. That doesn't mean the cloud providers aren't going to be there, but I think we're seeing a flourishing of innovation of hardware, software, and willingness to invest and build things in industries that we haven't seen for a long time because the vendors just had such a hammerlock on everything. I hear you, Paul. I would just say some of what you just said is kind of old thinking. Hey, I need an established audience, all that other stuff. It's like, yeah, sure, that's a factor. But now we're seeing, people who, when was the last time a law firm was willing to start to do, leading edge implementation of a technology base with its customers? The answer is never. I mean, we just had a thing. We have car companies talking about, putting mesh networks in the car, like, the architecture of the car is coming apart. The architecture of law firms is coming apart. I think there's a much more fundamental thing. Certainly, in my lifetime, it's last time this looked like this was like 70s, 80s, something like this, and this is bigger.
Excellent point.
Sounds like we're at time, Tim. Is that Ankaj? I think that was the last article, correct?
Yes, Paul.
Great. So thanks, everyone. Have a good day.